The Israeli-Gaza war and the troubles in Israel, in the West Bank as well, have led to a destruction in humanity, inhumane treatment, torture allegations in particularly Israeli jails. And The Guardian today has done a report about that and has interviewed Palestinian detainees who have talked about systemic abuse. The situation raises significant ethical concerns and questions about the failure of basic civilized behavior in a modern state, the collapse of the basic principles of civilization. The Guardian highlights the story of Ashraf al-Muhtaseb, and he's a musician who has suffered severe injuries and health deterioration, losing the use of one ear during his imprisonment. Al-Muhtaseb describes leaving the prison system with significant physical damage, including the loss of hearing in his left ear, 4 fractured ribs, a broken hand, severe weight loss of 30 kilograms. He recounts the brutal attack in Ketziot prison where he was beaten so severely that he lost his hearing. For a musician, it's just catastrophic and shameful. This personal account, corroborated by medical records and photographs, it's not isolated but part of a broader pattern of abuse reported by multiple detainees. And it doesn't matter whether you support the Israeli side or you support the Palestinian side. The moment you hear of allegations of prison, the law being used to further hostility, this isn't civilized. This is about crossing that ethical red line. And human rights organizations such as B'Tselem and testimonies from numerous former prisoners paint a grim picture of systemic abuse in Israeli jails. Yuli Novak, B'Tselem's executive director, argues that the extent of these practices suggests that they've become a state policy. And the alleged mistreatment includes physical violence, sexual assault, starvation, the denial of hygiene supplies, other forms of humiliation, and the reports indicate that no group of Palestinians is exempt, with both men and women experiencing severe and arbitrary violence. The Israeli government, through the Israel Prison Service and the military, has officially denied all of these allegations. They assert that the prison system operates under the law and democratic scrutiny, with any instances of abuse being exceptions rather than the rule. However, contrasting views within Israel, such as those expressed by the Shin Bet head Ronan Bar, highlight the internal acknowledgement of potential legal vulnerabilities regarding the treatment of detainees. The testimonies of individuals such as Mariam Salhab and Lama al-Fakhuri reveal a disturbing reality of psychological and physical abuse. Salhab describes being physically restrained and suffocated by soldiers, while al-Fakhuri recounts being denied basic sanitary supplies during her detention. These accounts are further substantiated by the experience of Ahmed Khalif, a human rights lawyer who witnessed severe beatings and inadequate medical care leading to the death of vulnerable prisoners like Mohammed al-Sabbar and Khalid Shamish. The far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has been a controversial figure in this narrative, and Ben-Gvir has publicly taken pride in the harsh conditions imposed on detainees, describing them as necessary in the reduction of disorder, reducing people's privileges, removing people's privileges, and this approach has been criticised as exacerbating the suffering of prisoners and reflecting a deeper ideological stance that undermines human rights. He's not alone in the degeneration of prison. He's not alone. It happens in Russia. It happens with the detention of refugees. It happened, I remember, in Greece. And it is wrong wherever it happens. And it needs a change of mentality and an improvement in the system. Because this is how you treat the prisoners, how you treat the poor. This is a measure. How you treat the stranger among you. This is the measure of how civilized you are as a society. It's also, incidentally, the bedrock of the Sermon on the Mount in Christianity. It's also, it runs through the Jewish social teaching. It runs through Islam. Treating prisoners well, treating the stranger well, treating the poor well. So the allegations of torture and inhumane treatment in Israeli prisons should be troubling to us all. And I see it as crossing this line. Once people like Netanyahu have crossed the line from goodness to evil, once their war becomes a thing about power and about the triumph of evil, you see that evil emerging in many different spheres. And the detention of prisoners is definitely one of them. It requires urgent international attention and investigation, and these reports challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths about the treatment of detainees, the ethical responsibility of states that support Israel. If Israel is clear, if it's transparent in the way it treats prisoners, then we should go into those prisons and examine them for ourselves. The testimonies and the evidence presented by former prisoners and human rights organizations demand a thorough and impartial inquiry to uphold the principles of justice and human dignity. And if this cannot be done, then we know the Israeli administration has descended to the pit of uncivilized behavior. We know, as we know in Russia. As we know. And people say I've got an anti-Russian bias. Well, because I had friends who were put in prison. Some of them have died. The treatment of prisoners is a reflection of society's commitment to human rights and ethical standards. And if you can't treat prisoners well, then your ethical standards are beneath contempt. The international community must insist on transparency, accountability, and adherence to international law in addressing these serious allegations. It's not just about keeping the law in their fight against Gaza. It's about keeping the law in ordinary prisons, particularly prisons housing Palestinians. Only through such measures can we hope to prevent further abuse and ensure justice for all individuals and ensure that Israel returns to civilized behavior. Because at the moment, it's questionable whether or not Israel, whether the Israeli parliament, whether the Israeli government is behaving in a civilized way. I think not.